The Supreme Court has announced it will hear 3 cases on whether or not federal discrimination laws protect gay and transgender people in the workforce. And the court's calendar all but ensures this social issue will be front and center during the presidential election. So let's bring in Think Progress columnist Ian Millhiser and general counsel at Alliance Defending Freedom, Kristen Wagner, to talk about it. Great to see you both tonight.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, and Kristen, I know that ADF, your group, is involved specifically with at least one of these cases that has to do with a funeral home that had an employee they had hired in 2007, I believe. He came to them in 2013 and said that he wanted to begin dressing as a woman in the workplace. They told him no. This has already gone through the process. It's going to end up in the Supreme Court now. What's your argument against that? Kristen?
What's my argument against? I'm sorry, I missed the question, Shannon, there.
No, just how this all played out with the funeral home and them telling him that he could not dress the way that he then identified. Why should they be allowed to tell him or to set that policy?
Well, because federal courts can't redefine what the law is according to their own policy preference. Sex discrimination in federal employment law is based on the biological realities of male and female. It always has, and that's how the courts have interpreted it. Redefining sex has grave consequences, and it's really not the job of a federal court to do that. That's the job of a legislature or the Congress.
Okay, Ian, I want to read you something from the New Yorker. The headline, "The dread of waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on LGBT rights." They don't sound too positive about this. They say the Supreme Court appears likely to resolve the contradictions by ruling that the Civil Rights Act does not ban discrimination against LGBT people. This would be the kind of legal backlash that could take a generation to undo. All most of us can do is watch this fragile object, queer rights in the United States, take an excruciatingly slow tumble. What do you think are the odds on this case?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with the word that you just read. I think, it's a very conservative court, and I think that the outcome in these cases is probably preordained, and that's unfortunate for a lot of reasons. I mean, what we're talking about is we're talking about sex discrimination. And sex discrimination is when you treat the men differently than you treat the women. So if I say that my male employees are allowed to date women and my female employees aren't, that's just sex discrimination. I'm treating them differently. If I engage in sex stereotyping, I say that the employees I perceive to be male have to dress and act one way, and the employees I perceive to be female have to dress and act another way, that's just run-of-the-mill sex discrimination. So I think this should be an easy case, but I don't disagree with anything in that New Yorker piece. I think the outcome is likely to be very bad for the plaintiffs.
Okay. The Wall Street Journal says the cases are going to end up in the 2020 election. They say the court's calendar all but ensures they're going to be in late spring or early summer of 2020, injecting the significant social issue and likely the makeup of the Supreme Court itself into the presidential election season. Love to get a comment quickly from both of you on that. First to you, Kristen.
Well, again, I think that the reason it may be an issue in the election is the staggering negative consequences of imposing a radical gender identity ideology on the American public. If we look at those consequences, we're already seeing those cases played out. It undermines bodily privacy rights, particularly for women and children. We have battered women's shelters who are being forced to admit men to sleep within a few feet of sex-trafficked women. It undermines conscience rights of doctors who are being forced to violate their conscience and perform surgeries on healthy people.
Okay.
There are so many different ways that it undermines the rights of women and children.
I got to give Ian 10 seconds before we get cut off.
Sure. So we had the Obergefell case a few years ago. That was the marriage equality case. People said the sky was going to fall, and as far as I could tell, the sky is still standing. So, if the Supreme Court does the right thing here, I think the sky will still be there and things will be fine.
All right. We'll watch the case this fall. Thank you both. More news.